Hello and good evening and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101, Tuesday evening here. Welcome to all of you who are joining us on this day, the day that has been designated by the United Nations as International Day for the Elimination of Racism. International Day for the Elimination of Racism. We went off air last night and we got the news that the PNC had applied, PNC, PNU, applied for a march against racism today, and that application was denied by the police. So on International Day for the Elimination of Racism, the police has denied the opposition permission for a march against racism, As I said last night, it's either the police are saying that they are not equipped to ensure that there is a peaceful march against racism, or they're saying that through the government, or the government is saying through them, that we are afraid of a march, and so we're not giving any permission. We've seen the responses from the government, from the president to the prime minister, the attorney general, to the head of the armed forces, to these statements that were made from the WPA platform, and the frenzy. And I noted last night also that I went through a broadcast, a news item from one of the television stations, and the news item quoted Ogunse as saying that Indians came from the slums of India. Of course, those words were not uttered by Ogunse. It was uttered by Sister Rhonda Lane, but the newscast attributed them to Ogunse. And then in the speech, Ogunse quoted a white diplomat who said, "Why are you all Black people in Guyana complaining about oppression when the majority of your people are in the armed forces?" Ogunse was careful to quote that in his speech. The newscast attributed those words to Ogunse, and so that's the charge against him. I made the point that I went to see Brother UC on Saturday when I was in Atlanta, and he said so many people have called him and told him about what Ogunse said, and he kept asking what he actually said, and none of the reporters or the people who called him to tell him could tell him exactly. And when I got there, I was able to play the actual Ogunse speech from beginning to end for him. It's amazing the way in which the media and all these people who are condemning, they took their lead from what the government said, what the president and the AG and others said Ogunse said. Very few of them went and listened to what the man said. The government said, the man said so thing. Our friend, Demerara, for example, Demerara is not a PPP outlet, but Demerara is quoted Ogunse saying, the team must get ready, and the man never used such a word as a team. And so sometimes with these things, we get careful, and you saw Rafidev, repeating that error in Demerara. So very few of these people who are condemning left, right, and center really took the time to listen to what the brother said. That's the country that we are in. We understand these days people don't go and read things and listen to things. But somebody says, Ogunse called for a mutiny in the army, or Ogunse called for this and called for that. I think the fairest statement thus far coming from the government actually came from the Prime Minister, who accused the WPA of looking for sympathy in the army. He didn't go with all the other things. He said they're looking for sympathy in the army. Not necessarily accurate, but certainly you can see that he actually listened to what Ogunse said. Good evening, welcome to Politics 101. We are familiar by now with the news that Brother Elton McCrae from BV, after exposing another land scandal in BV, came out of his house and he was pounced upon by some men who came out of a car and beaten up, and the men promptly drove away. From what we are hearing, the men are not from BV, but they assaulted Brother Elton McCrae. So we are keeping on top of that. We just got a flyer on Sunday night. The WPA went into Victoria and held a meeting, a public meeting in Victoria. And we have just gotten here, that's 2 and 3, 5, 11 government ministers are visiting Victoria on Saturday. 11 government ministers. Victoria outreach on Saturday, March 25th at 10 a.m. at the Victoria Community Center. 11 ministers, my goodness. Wow. So a death party brought out from the head of state to the head of government to the attorney general to all the chambers of commerce and all the PPP acolytes. And now this death party went to Victoria, and the PPP is going to Victoria. 11 ministers. Sisters and brothers, you know, a couple of people have called me and said, David, you know, you all should pull back, and, you know, and you all should pull back because this thing may go too far. And I told them what the WP has decided. Pull back from what? Pull back from what? And of course, as the WPA said, we are not withdrawing not one word from what was said by Ogunse. And I think we have to understand as a people when we are winning and do not allow fear. You see, then we said very clearly, when you all are ready, go and arrest Ogunse and charge him for what you all want to charge him for. It changes the equation. Bullies do not, like I remember Frederick Douglass always told a story. As you all know, he was born into slavery. And he said, one day the master approached him to beat him. And as he was about to whip him, he raised his hand to hit back. And the master's whip was left in midair. The master could not envisage that a slave was going to raise his hand either to hit him back or to prevent him from being whipped. And sometimes we believe that we have to have some big revolution, boots on the ground, as our people like to tell us. Sometimes force is not needed. What is needed is the threat that if you continue with what you are doing, there'll be consequences. That's all we have told the PPP. And it's running all over the place. And people are asking me, David, but why you all politicians couldn't come up with that before? CLR James talks about time, place, and person. He says the fusion of the time, the place, and the person who gives the message is very important, because he says that the person or the organization that becomes the messenger must have the capacity to absorb the energies around them. And that is why they're able, right time, fusion with the right place and the right person. I suppose the PPP was never expecting any organization to really stand up and to say to them, stop this nonsense. No. They felt that they had all of us entrapped in their one Guyana and the fear that they've been driving in the nation, that they perhaps didn't expect an organization or a party other than the PNC to stand up and tell them, stop this nonsense now. As we have said in the WPA, we are walking on two legs. The first leg is to ensure the removal of the PPP from office via election. But to do that, we have to ensure that the rules for the elections are favorable to all the participants. It means a clean voters list, it means biometrics, etc., etc. But the other foot that we're walking on is the foot that says people are being oppressed now. And the oppression cannot wait. That kind of oppression cannot wait for an election. And we have to stop it now. Those are the two planks of the WPA's position. That is what Ogunse has cleared the way for us to put it in the open. And we've announced civil disobedience and non-cooperation. And people have been asking us to tell us what it actually means. No, that's not our job. That's not our job. People in their day-to-day activities will define for themselves what civil disobedience and non-cooperation can mean. We read a news story yesterday that Mr. Nandalal claimed that his private law firm, there was an attempted arson. No investigation. Apparently the place, there was a fire, and he concluded, he's overseas, and he concluded that it's arson, attempted arson. Well, are they going to do things to blame the opposition? Whatever they do, they're responding to the political developments in the last couple of weeks. That is clear. That is clear. So the PPP is going to Victoria. We understand there is a PPP cell in Victoria that was prepared to break up the WPA meeting on Sunday night. And we got word of that. They never broke up the meeting. They never broke up the meeting. But the PPP is going in to Victoria. Sisters and brothers, we are at a critical time in our political history. And as I said, in politics, Henry Jeffrey and GHK Lall are coming on. They're ready. They're ready. So I'm not going to be long. But Jeffrey always reminds us of that there are hundreds of ways, 100, 200, 300 ways to confront a government. And we must not believe that the only way we can confront the government is the ways that we know to put so many people on the streets and boots on the ground as we have gotten. There are other ways. There are other ways. And one of the ways you confront the government is that you decide, either as an individual, as a political party, that you are going to you're going to put your life on the line, either as an organization. In the old days, Sidney King used to go and sit down in front of government buildings and fast. The last time he did one, I think, was 1987. But one remembers him in the 1960s doing it. That's another way. There are so many ways of dramatizing the heart of a nation. And I remember many governments trying to weaponize Guyana's fast. The government will try to weaponize what you do, but you have to not allow yourself. We cannot allow ourselves to be muzzled by fear. Good evening, welcome to Politics 101, wherever you are joining us from. Quite an interesting interview last night with Ganesh Maipal and Mark Benchop. Very instructive. I hope those of you who listen to that interview are very, 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 very clear, because I think it's very important. Ganesh made it plain, made it clear that he's in the PNC not to fight an African Guyanese struggle. He's in the PNC to fight for all Guyana. And no matter how Mark tried to explain to him that the African condition is different from the Indian and Amerindian condition, he said, no. He's not denying that Africans are more oppressed, but that's not his fight. That for him, there's a difference between the quantitative and the collective. And you all have to be fair. You all have to be fair, because you all ask the Black people in the PNC, Mark Phillips and them, you all always say they should represent Black people interests in the PPP. You all say that. You all vex with them because they don't do that. And if Brother Ganesh is saying that he's not in the PNC, I'm summarizing him here, to represent the interests of one ethnic group, then you all can't vex with the man. Because you all just ask Black people in the PPP to represent the interests of Black people. So I found the interview very, very, very instructive. And I know that a lot of you all going to vex with Ganesh. You all want Black people in the PPP to represent Black people interests. And if Ganesh is intimating that he's there to represent the interests of Indian Guyanese, and he kept stressing that Indian Guyanese suffer too under this government. And Mark tried to tell him they suffer because of their political affiliation. But Africans suffer both because of political affiliation and their ethnicity, their race. And he wouldn't buy that. He wouldn't. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. Today is International Day for the Elimination of Racism. And an application for a march against racism was denied. This is our Guyana. Let me bring in my guests tonight, Dr. Henry Jeffrey, and GHK Lall. Good evening, all of you. Good evening, Henry. Good evening, Gabriel.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Let's start the program with your own reflections on International Day for the Elimination of Racism, and how applicable or not applicable is the day this year for Guyana. I start with you, Gabriel.
Good evening, everyone.
Elimination of racism is a noble target. I think it's taking on too much. At least the objective must be minimization of racism. That's the first step, the first few steps before we can even think of or talk about elimination of racism anywhere. Noble, idealistic, and what have you. Racism is a cancer, repeating the obvious. It's it's syphilitic. It spreads. It's contagious. It's piercing. It's deep, and it's very much alive in Guyana. Some people might say it's discrimination. I don't know if that's a lesser form of racism based on one's color, one's political affiliation, but definitely we have that. And currently, it's impacting Black Guyanese, African Guyanese exponentially. Amerindian Guyanese also, and some Indo Guyanese who speak up, who have run afoul of the PPP government. Discrimination, racism. A few months back, we were talking about an apartheid state here, an emerging apartheid state. And you were talking about frenzies earlier. My God, the hysterias. I thought somebody was going to assault me in a public place during that time, but at least some of us kept our heads. Now, we have racism in Guyana, and it's ugly, and I think currently it's the worst that I've ever seen it. I've been here during the time post 1964, in the early years of Burnham, and it was bad then. I used to come back every year, starting in the late 80s, and I could sense it, detect it, the resentments, the antagonisms, the animosities. But today, I've been back here for several years now, continuously, but today the racism in this country is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. In this country, we talk about one Guyana, and I think that's a real poor joke. It's a real poor joke, and to make matters worse, it's a running joke, and it's spearheaded by no one less than the president himself. He should listen to himself sometimes. He should try to reconcile his words with his actions, or whatever visions are in his head when he talks about one Guyana and the reality of what Guyana is in terms of its racism and its racist structures, and agents. And it's harrowing today. So when I hear you talking about the nervousness, you didn't say that, I am saying it, the sensitivity of the Guyana Police Force to a march in recognition of International Day for the Elimination of Racism being denied, the permission for the march being denied. My question is, what is there to fear? What is there to fear about a march to speak to or to support a day for the elimination of racism, especially when it's so especially stark? It's so stark today in this country. We need that ventilation. We need that visibility of such a march. So obviously, I would think in this instance, the Ghana Police Force is operating on orders under no circumstances let that march begin. And so when we do that, whatever is being felt, the oppression that is being felt, the suppressions that are being practiced, they bottle up, they constrict, the pipeline becomes clogged, and then you have an out, you have a flare up, you have a verbal presentation in Buxton with an Ogunse, a brother, and everybody says, well, how could he? Why did he go down this road and in this manner? We'll get to that momentarily. International Day for the Elimination of Racism. I encircle it with my hand and hug it, with my arms and hug it. The fact is, it's not going away with a hug. It has to go away with concrete action. It has to dissipate and diminish and then lessen step by step. It's a long, arduous process. We've got to have many hands. We've got to have many minds meeting. We're not having that here in Guyana. We can't even make a start. We can't even have a march. It's not a protest, it's a march to give expression to the hurts in this country, to the victims of racism who are saying, I am a victim of a racist government, of racial discrimination because of who I am. What is so wrong about that? What is so undemocratic about that? What is so heretical about that? I would like to know. So the fact that the, the permission for a march in recognition, in support, in solidarity with the the UN's International Day for the Elimination of Racism, in itself says something. It says beyond the fear, beyond the nervousness, beyond the concerns, the anxieties, that in my book, that's a form of racism in itself. That's a form of race. We don't want it. We know your situation. We understand. We hear your condition, but we don't want to hear. We don't want to hear it. We don't want to see it. We don't want to know about it. Let it just be there. Let it fester until such time that whatever happens, happens. That's my little 2 cents reflection on the International Day for the Elimination of Racism.
Dr. Jeffrey, your reflections on International Day for the
Well,
Elimination of Racism.
thank you, David. Let me begin, though, by commenting on Mr. Elton McCrae from BV, like myself. I'm always in BV, and I came from BV. And I must hope that too much damage has not been done and he will be well. I know Elton is a stalwart, and he expected this. He expected this because he thought that he touched the heart of the problem, and he has proven himself right. That essentially there is something there for people to look at closer. What he has said has brought out the goons and the hooligans, and doing Elton anything, it's already in the public domain, and it is for the relevant authorities to now deal with what Elton had to say, because he has demonstrated here. He has paid for demonstrating that there is something really not right going on in BV in the terms of the distribution of lands and so on. That has been now made quite clear if there was any doubt whatsoever. So, Elton, well, let's hope that, well, I know you'll be all right, and when I see you, I see you. In terms of the elimination of racism, it's a very difficult subject for a country like Guyana. What do they really mean? At one level, the United Nations is saying every ethnic group has a right to its own representative. So if I am in an ethnic or racist group, I have a right to vote, to marry, to go to church, which is that my ethnic group go to church. There's no political organization should be telling me that I can't vote for my ethnic racial group. There's nothing against that. Indeed, the governments of the day are supposed to protect my rights to do that. So I have a right to vote for an ethnic group if I feel like voting for, and to marry another ethnic or anything as I feel. And no government has a right me from doing so. Unfortunately, we have a government in Guyana that thinks that is its job and its duty. It's one Guyana policy. It's essential to tell me, don't vote for your ethnic group. This is absurd. You are trying to take away my basic political right. I have a political right. Man, who was it says so? Descartes or Plato. Man is a political animal. Aristotle, I think. Yeah, man is a political animal. He only grows in society, and that's why the political function is perhaps the most important function in a society. It determines what happens in a society. Since then, Aristotle saying this kind of a thing. And if I choose to vote for people that I know, people that I associate with, people of my culture, you have no right. You have no duty to set up nothing called One Guyana to stop me from doing so. Indeed, as I said, I'm protected by international conventions that have a right, or you have a right, and all of us have a right to vote for ethnic group, and they must be protected by law. Good. But that's one. But there is the elimination of racism has another level. Racism in terms of the distribution of how people are treated in a society and all that kind of distribution of the wealth of a society, how people are treated and so on. And that is as important. That I think David called that is a third tranche that must be dealt with immediately. People are being discriminated against because they are choosing not to follow the PPP. And therefore, these people you have to get a situation immediately to deal with that situation. This is not something you must wait for. And I believe that a case has been made by civil society that is looking into the interests of Black people and so on, African people, that this discrimination is real. Contracts are being passed. I heard this morning on the news, we can show that Black people are getting more, African people are getting more now than under the PNC. Well, then they were getting 1. Now you give them 2. They are getting more, but you're giving the other side 10. These sort of things make me believe that people think you're childish. Which Black people you're talking about? Black people you choose? Because you want to destroy Black solidarity? That's the Black people you're talking about? That's getting the more? So I sat there and said, these people are not serious. First of all, I have a right to vote for whom I want to vote for. Black, white, green, brown. But I have a right to vote for my ethnicity, and nobody has a right to try force me into to not doing so. And that's precisely what the PPP is doing. And secondly, I have as a citizen of a country, because we are not a people, we might become a people sometime down the road, and it's the politicians that are preventing us from being a people. Because if we had proper arrangement for governance, we wouldn't have been in this crap quarreling all over the place about who is this and who is that. Because there are many, I think there might well be more, given their numerical strength. There might well be as many, if not more, poor Indians than Africans. But that is not the point. the point that Africans are being discriminated against, and they know it. And in countries like in the developed countries, they have decided that, look, we have to deal with this United Nations issue area about discrimination. And what they have done ethnic audits. They have gone and done ethnic audits, inclusive ethnic audits, to see where discrimination is taking place in the society, if any. What is the level of the wealth distribution in the society? And what kind of arrangements must be made so that the distribution can be better, can improve? I think sufficient case being made by Africans. You had Nigel, you had others who have made a case that the way you are distributing all these contracts and resources again. Now you have the resources. You as a government, you have a responsibility to run this country without all these aggrievances on all sides. You should be the first one to say, let's do an ethnic audit. Don't stand up on radio and say, we getting more under this now than under the PNC. You black people, African. What is childish foolishness? You can do a scientific analysis, scientific audit, and it's your duty to do it. From the time the PPP come to office to this day, 20-something, 5 years, how wealth has been distributed and how we must go forward. You do an open audit into that, it might at first open a lot of eyes, but at least you will set a pathway. You will set a pathway that we're going. People are never unreasonable. You can't change things overnight, but at least you will set a pathway. But you're not hearing that from the government. All they want to do is stand up on the stage and say, you got in more than when you were under the PNC. Well, the PNC might have their own way of thinking of governance, for all I know, of how to govern. What I'm saying is that the black people believe that the PPP is deeply ethnically racist party. And listen, you remember last week I wrote an article. Listen to this, and I quote Stabrick News, because Stabrick News, you can't go say Stabrick News against the PPP. I don't think so. And, they said, they were talking about Gonzi and, Gonzi making a big fuss about, calling people to arms, but, not dealing with this issue. But they made the point that he should have been dealing with. They say there is a more fundamental problem. The government will not give the opposition any space to function, either in parliament or in local government, even where it is required by the Constitution. In other words, there is discrimination against the representatives whom the African constituents voted into office. Mouth open,
Story jump out.
PPP is discriminating against your representatives, those who you sit down and voted for. They're saying, we don't want. We do not want. And the United Nations is against that. That is what the PPP is doing. It's not Henry Jeffrey. For anybody to go la dying about Henry Jeffrey. This here was said in open, and it is true, it is hard. When you have to do a paper and write facts day after day and think, it's hard to run away from the facts that are on the paper there. That the most important element of the human being is his politics. In the old days, you used to have direct democracy in Greece and so on. After that, you have representative democracy. What am I if I don't have politics? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You can have all the monies in the world and politics will ruin it overnight. We have seen that in any country. Some of the big ass. You got Maduro got more oil than anybody in the world, and yet half his people are all over the world running helter-skelter. We have resources, and in the 60s and the 80s, we are all over the place just the same because of politics. Politics can ruin you. So when you're telling my representative they are not my representatives and you're not dealing with them, there can be no bigger insult. No bigger insult to me. You can take all the money I have, but there can be no big insult to me that tell me that I cannot be part of the governance of a country in which I live. How do you do that? How do you and talk about one Guyana? Well, this one Guyana is based on a myth. And not only a myth, a deliberate act in a part two. Firstly, we are done with the days of assimilation. When we used to say, you remember the old days? Oh, we got to be one, we got to learn the British way, and we all going to be British. Well, everybody now realizes that is foolishness. That's not going to happen. So the whole world has changed. This is what they are trying to, this one guy is that, he can get rid of racism. This is madness. Clear madness. How are you going to get rid of racism? Today, everybody realizes you have multiculturalism and all sorts of isms that allows our peoples to learn to live together and then communicate together. It is the political forces in this country that has prevented that from happening. Because ever so often they come up with these foolishness and running around all over the place. And election comes and we are in a competitive political economy. That is why the system has to change. You cannot have a system that pits us against each other. Anything I'm saying here, I said it during the election campaign. I said it. I said nobody, voting race is not a big thing. Vote for who you want to. Vote for your race if you want to. If it turns out that by voting race, we have two large ethnic parties ruling the roost, we must know to devise a system that would prevent any one of them from taking advantage of the other side. That is our job as politicians, to try to divide, not to try to get in the position and do it to the other side. To get into the position to say that these groups are equal things and we must run. And that is what would make us one Guyana, one nation, one people, one nation with a one destiny. But you'll never have it with this nonsense. You trying to diminish my representative and then telling me that, I mean, what am I? I'm nobody if I don't have politics. Nobody. Do not fool yourself. And I think is that what gets to people like Hinds'Sight. Hinds'Sight was saying his cause is right. When he called on the armed force and them and said they're going to do it, he's saying, look here. They're the same. They are the majority in this thing, and they're the same position as I am. They're the same position. They have no thing. And the armed forces is supposed to be neutral. It's supposed to be impartial. I sat at cabinet and here a top army man and said to Janet Jagan, I think it's Janet, could have been Ched because it was up work. No, that cannot happen. No. Indeed, I sat there. At first I said, "Huh?" But then I went and looked at it and I said, yes, these people are, I suppose, they're guardians of the Constitution. And the people, they are supposed to give not only the, you tell me about the police did that and the police did. The police is part of the security forces on this country. Their job is not to follow nothing a many ministers tell them. Their job is to say what makes our people secure and go and tell it to the minister and say what is right and what is wrong. At least, at the very least, they gotta advise the minister along the right way. It is not just to sit down there and, oh, you move and you move army and you move. No, the Constitution says you are the guardian of me. The Constitution. You have authority here, but you are not beholden to any single government of the day. You should warn the opposition similar. When we talk about government, we talk about government in a holistic manner. You must talk to the opposition too and say, what you are trying to do there is crap. If that is what you think. And you do these things quietly, army, and these people don't come out. But they do it in every sensible country in the world. The army comes out and says, oh, look, boss, you know, the thing, you know, this can't happen. So this is the day when the police will do what they want. This is the day also that we have to sit down and consider quite clearly what is the problem. The problem is racism, yes, but it is what is driving this racism? It's racism, but what's driving it? Well, yeah, we live here, me, Indian black people, we go to a corner shop, we drink and things. But what's driving it? It's when one group try to stand and say that it will rule. These parties are ethnic groups. They are not just neutral political parties. They are ethnic groups. 90% of their votes come. And when Mr. Ganesh Naipaul, when he says that I am in the PNC, I'm in the PNC, and I would have thought that he would have said, I am the PNC to look after the interests of all Guyanese. And there is nothing will go on in the PNC, nothing that would go on with the PNC when I am there that harms Indians. But I'm going to tell you, nothing going to go on there too that harms Africans. That is what I thought he would have said. Yeah. Because that is, in my view, the correct way. I'm in the PPP, you can't tell me nothing but do nothing against Africans. Well, that wouldn't come to me with that. You can't tell me that, no matter what the Africans had thought. Because once you know in that party, and I say people, lots of people who say, this and that. I said, you know, I crossed the Rubicon half of you, stay where you were. You don't have that experience. So don't tell me. But effectively, nobody could have come and tell me anything about anything. No, you can't tell me doing just anything in any party I am. It's not it's not Indian and Africans here. They have their Indians have their culture, Africans have their culture. That's fine. I might be even culturalists. We call ourselves men of the world, but that's not the point. The point is, must have a system that allows no one of us to discriminate against the other. Thanks, David.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey, they're laying it out. Gabriel, let me bring you in again. When we met here 2 weeks ago, we were reflecting on public meetings by the WPA. It was the day before the Buxton meeting. We could not have known then, and this is the way politics operate, we could not have known then that 2 weeks later, we would be talking about a firestorm that ensued from Ogunse's statement. I'm not going to ask you any specific question. I think you've written about 3 or 4 columns on this issue. Give us your take on Ogunse's intervention, the developments that follow, and the context in which all of this is happening.
Thank you. Well, we're talking about racism. That was our introductory issue, elimination of racism, and Dr. Jeffrey went to town there a moment ago, and we thank him for that. Racism in Guyana, discrimination in Guyana, and the brunt of it is being felt by Black Guyanese. Indian Guyanese are also feeling it, and indigenous Guyanese are also feeling it. But there's nobody who feels it as much and as deeply as Black Guyanese. Let's get that on the table. And I think what I heard from Brother Takuma, as combustibly as he may have said it, is that there is frustration, there is contentiousness, there is resentment, and there is rising anger at the disrespect, the dismissal that is being meted out to my people. What I heard there was Ogunse standing up and laying it on the line and saying, somebody's got to talk for these people. Somebody's got to break out of the mold. And somebody is going to say it as it is, and I am the one to do it. Now, I've heard that he has a history of this and that and whatever, and that the time for that is past. You know, they say that you write and you speak, and that's wonderful, and that has its values. But there's a time to go beyond the talk. I think, first of all, why he did that was in my mind a shock tactic, a shock approach. Somebody's going to sit up here now and listen, and they're going to pay close attention in whatever way that appeals to them. I am going to rock the boat and rattle the cage and rub the hair of the dog the wrong way. And I think he set out to do that, and he did it. He succeeded in doing that because I am speaking for all those people who do not have a voice, whose representatives and institutions in the villages and in the councils and in the highest body in this land are being disdained, are being scorned. Do we really have a parliament? Do we really have a reviewing oversight body called a parliamentary accounts committee, a public accounts committee, a PAC? Do these things function as they should? So if those things are not function, then if the orthodox is not functioning, has no meaning in this so-called democracy, then perhaps the unorthodox, the out of the ordinary, is going to make people sit up and pay some attention. And I think that the oppressions that are being felt by Black Guyanese in their jobs, in their recruitment, in their longevity, in the employment spaces, public employment spaces, in contracts, in what is being done in their communities and not being done. Interesting, you said in Victoria you go on 11 ministers followed in your wake. I think that's got to be a strategy of the opposition parties. And I say that in all seriousness, because if you can get 11 ministers following in your wake every place you go, you're onto something. You're onto something that makes these people pause and listen and act, even if it's after the fact. So that is an aside. So we come back. Takuma spoke his heart, and his heart is not one of those faint ones. He's not a shrinking violet. So he puts it there on the line, and he is saying, he's not saying anything different, with due respect to him singling out, with due regard to him singling out the armed forces, where I think because of its composition, there is some ultra sensitivity there, and it was only going to go down one road, the road that brought down damnation and brimstone on his head. But here's this Constitution. We're talking about Constitution in this country, and the constitutional role of the joint forces is, I take that for granted. We agree to that. Stipulate, as the lawyers would say. Here's the story. Since when in this country have our governments and our leaders, plural, have been shown an inclination, a consistent inclination to be constitutionally oriented? We go now to our institutions, meaning our armed forces, our Ghana Defense Force, our Ghana Police Force, and you are saying these guys are not dumb, from the commanders to the corporals. They are not dumb. They are not illiterates. They know what's going on in this small society. Who is constitutional? What is unconstitutional? They know it more than me, perhaps all three of us put together. And so the story is, we were saying, well, now given what Mr. Takuma has said, we've got to be even more vigilant, and so to be on guard here. Constitution has been kicked about, a political football, etc., etc. Here is this story. His appeal touched a raw nerve, and so we have all these reactions coming out. But the man is speaking to the plight of his people. He's speaking primarily, let us acknowledge that, to the plight of the African Guyanese constituency. But by definition, when you start speaking about racism because of political affiliation, because of color, and because of all those other things, you are including all those who are targeted by a racist PPP government and its leadership for special treatment, the treatment that leaves them without. So if we are continuously going to be without, then how we are in a position now where we have nothing left to lose. We are made to feel like losers. We feel like we are losers. We believe we are losers. And in fact, it is accurate because we've got nothing to lose. Therefore, an Ogunse says what he says, justifiably or not, agreed to or not. And here's the kicker here. If he doesn't say it, there are 100 others, 1,000 others, 10,000 others out there who are thinking about it, not necessarily directly in a direct communication to the army, but they have said it at Cotton Tree, they have said it in Georgetown. Why y'all being house slaves to these people who discriminate and are busting the back of your own people? So here's this. He has stood up. He has come forward. He has said that. Look, I think this man is fearless. I think he has set an example here for others. And for others who are thinking along the same line, not necessarily with the army in mind or the joint services, but they're saying, well, here we are in this country with all these oil riches. And by the way, reference to the PNC and APNU and AFC context is irrelevant. It has no bearing. What we have today, yes, and it did wrongs, many, many wrongs, terrible things. It didn't look out for its own people. We acknowledge that. We agree to that. But there's no comparison with what is available today in terms of the assets for distribution and the inequity of the distribution. So therefore, any reference to the PNC and the coalition is out of the window, and that should go the way of what's that, global supply chain management and COVID-19 and that. Let us face where we are today. And what Takuma was saying, we are not getting our fair share. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to go out there and speak for you and say we are not getting our fair share. And that, how long are you going to sit on your hands and be a party, a contributor to what is going on in the trenches and in the elevators and in the heights, the elevations of Guyana, when you are hungry? How do I feel? How do I feel when my neighbor, who's not like me, is living off the hog. And to use an expression I wrote somewhere else, he's gotten the hog, and even the hooves I can't get, because that they're taking away too, because they want to strip me of everything, something to put in my pot, on my plate, and even my dignity. And when you go so far as to take people's dignity away, not only the resentment simmer some more, they bubble over. What we heard there is Takuma saying just that, giving expression to that, giving voice to that, giving visibility to that. Now, he has stirred some fires. He's made some people think. He has raised the bar on himself and mostly on many others, Indians and African Guyanese, Amerindian Guyanese. Now, he has put also the PPP in a precarious position. What does it do with this man? We heard talk about terroristic this and subversive and hostility and incitement, and they quote scripture and verse and book and bell and candle and whatever else. Okay, there it is. He didn't say those words on social media. I think he was tactically astute enough to put it in a place where it can't be erased, where it can't be deleted, like some, those guys who skulk behind those clandestine setups and say what they have to say. He went into Buxton, and Buxton has a certain reputation, and he said the words he said, however it's interpreted, and now that that hot potato is in the PPP's hands, and they are kind of weighing and what we want to move against this guy, but what are we going to get after that? If we don't move against him, how do we look? What is that going to incentivize him and others to do at an even more fevered pitch? What is it that is going to go on in their heads, meaning the Takuma's heads, and to say, well, we can push the envelope even further. I think the PPP, it's damned if it's do and it's damned if it's don't. So it's now about almost 2 weeks. I think today is going on to 2 weeks, if I'm right, since this has happened. If it has to make some move, because it is about showing, flexing its muscles and showing, look, we are in charge and we know how to take charge and we know what we have to do. That there is something that I wouldn't advise that they go very, very roughly into. I think Takuma has done his part. I think it was deliberate. I think it was tactically wise. As much as I disagree with some of what he said, I think he speaks for a lot of people and their pain, their hurts, their anger, their frustrations, their disenchantments, and their disillusions. And at the end of the day, when you come down to it, this is what you come down to it, my brothers and sisters listening. You come down to a people who have got nothing. We are the richest people in the world per capita, and GDP and economy divided by 750,000. So then why am I? Why am I hungry? Why am I without? Why am I so hand to mouth? Why am I living paycheck to paycheck? Why are my people, my representatives being disrespected? Why are my brothers and sisters in the public service, a traditional stronghold, being discriminated against? Why am I being treated to a different standard of law enforcement? Is this the richest country in the world? Is this a democracy? Is this one Guyana? It is not. And if it's not for me, then I can't go on living like that. And that is what Takuma spoke to.
Thank you very much, GHK. Henry, straight over to you.
Well, okay. David, as I ended just now, it appears to me that we have to have some kind of rapprochement about where this nation needs to go. And I think I've been doing some stuff on constitutional reform and so on. And I think that it is a place that perhaps the parties might want to sit down and come up with some other structures. The Americans have been saying it to them. The Americans and the British, they have long memories, institutional memories. They say countries like yours cannot survive sensibly with a winner-takes-all political system. You have to respect other people's representative. They must respect yours. And you have to sit at the table and determine what is good for all the ethnicities of Guyana. No one group, no African group can sit out there, because the PNC is essentially an African party. I mean, both parties like to say they are multi-ethnic. Well, they are open to any ethnicity, but they are essentially multi-ethnic. Even the people in Stabroek News say that they are, because that is the truth. And they have to be at the table to make decisions about their people. You're almost equal in this country. You realize, you see what's happening in America. You see what's happening in America. And no matter what you do to Trump, he got about 43% of support from Republicans and others. 43%. Once you get there, there's something fundamentally wrong with the system. They'll reach this stage where they're going to have to say themselves that they'll have to consider, how do we deal with this 43% that are still out there with Donald Trump? No matter what he does. I bring that to say that don't think any Orphan Alley or Granger or Norton go convince any Indian person or African person. They might try to buy you over. And as I said just now, it's a dangerous thing to try to do. It must be, even according to international law, illegal to try to walk around trying to break a group spirit, an ethnic group spirit, to vote for their own representatives. Must be illegal. And therefore, why do all this? For what? For what? Maybe we don't have all the wealth we should have had out of this, but we have they said our GDP is growing. Well, GDP doesn't mean much. Maybe you need more the national income rather than a GDP, because maybe Exxon alone gonna three-quarters of the GDP as profits and all sorts of nonsense. So you need to talk more about gross national income. And when you come down to that, it's not a lot. It's not that much, but we have. Let us part it equally. Let us sit down and do things in a collective way. Instead of that, the PVP is gone now to some autocratic Arab country to say that they are going to do ID card. The minute you hear the PPP and anything but ID card, you know it's voting. I don't want to hear if it's about voting. They're going to do ID card. They got to know, they tender or nothing. They bring out some man from some woodwork who is known not to be quite above board individual and tell us that he's this guy. Since you hear ID card, you know it's about voting. And they gotta do this all by themselves. You're saying this are mad people. This must be a mad group. Why is it that they're trying to hold on to power? Why? African people, what they're going to do to Indian people, or Indian people going to do anything to African? Why are they why is this? Some people said they want to steal, but I don't think when you are in a position like they are, you are all right. You don't have to go this route. I mean, there are various ways to steal. I'll leak one. You start paying yourself $1 million a month and send get rid of corruption, because if you pay yourself $1 million US a month and you pay your boys down the stairs, you already cornered the corruption for yourself. But you're doing it from the public purse, and then you say, oh, I've got to rid of corruption. And then you can come down hard on everybody else because you paid yourself $1 million a month. I mean, but outside of that, we need to sit down carefully and try to use the upcoming constitutional reform process. And David, if your party don't have it on its sides, put it in the sides, and to come with a system that don't encourage us to fight each other ever so often. This is what is happening. This system just encouraging African and Black people to fight all the time. This is what they're doing. And we have to get a system that don't do that. And you'll be surprised how well we will live.
Yes, and I'm glad you raised that. I was in Atlanta on the weekend, and one of the last questions was asked, after this what? And I made the point that at the end of the day, it has to be national reconciliation, and that national reconciliation must be based on concrete things, including how we share the governance, how we share the economic pie. Certainly, we are in that direction. Gabriel raised the question just now that how does the PPP deal with this? Are they going to go after Ogunse? Are they going to let it slide, pull back? You know them well, at least better than me and Gabriel. How do you think they are going to respond?
I think they will respond, but I don't think they want to even. I don't think with what's taking place that they would want even to do it in the immediacy. They want ethnic political dominance in Guyana. But there is too much on the table right now with all of this and all these American people coming. It's too much for them to want to come here to do this. I believe they're going to sit down and try something in the future, because the essence really isn't put it the other way. The essence is to get their way in dominating the politics of Guyana. It's not really to show off that they can do this and they can do that. They're smart enough to know that they're sure enough thing we got a thing, and in any case, the Americans got a big hand in what's going on, So I mean, who they know that too. A huge hand in what's taking place here at this point in time.
Gabriel, let's go ahead. Let's segue into the issue of American security and insecurity of Guyanese.
Well, I noticed that the congressional delegation that came here was talking up about the success of the trip, and now we have this energy security pact being about to be finalized, about to be executed. So that's good for America, and I'll tell you why. It's something I've written to come out in another day or two. Right now, something that has not been spoken of very much in this country, the Chinese have been able to broker a rapprochement, to use Dr. Jeffrey's word, a rapprochement, a slight one between Saudi Arabia and Iran. No sworn religious enemies, Sunni Muslims and Shiite Muslims. in respectively in those countries. The Chinese have been able to bring them back together. So now you're looking at OPEC oil. Let's look at this carefully here. OPEC oil, the Russians and the Saudis, part of OPEC Plus. The Russians have, I think they are competing with Venezuela for reserves in terms of in quantity. So you have that huge crescent block of oil to the east. Oil, the engine of military and economic power, standards, and so on and so forth. You have all that fossil fuel on which the world runs over there. OPEC, OPEC Plus. You have the Saudi Arabians talking about weaning away from the American dollar to some other kind of currency. So what I see here is American influence fading slightly. It's been happening for a while now. Now, in the context of that, of those developments away from us, Guyana's oil takes on even greater value and significance to America, to America. Hence, in the elections, during the elections time, we had Secretary of State Pompeo coming here. We had two fellas from the Vice President's office here. We had the President of Guyana and the Vice President being summoned to Washington on short notice to whatever happened there to meet with the Secretary of State. We are on the move, and we are in the center of the picture frame. So we have the Vice President delegation coming here, and now we have the congressional delegation with Mr. Smith here, and he is clapping himself and his team. We are on the verge of signing this energy security pact, and in lockstep, our president says, yes, we are this partner of the United States, and we are a good friend, and so on and so forth. Good for America, energy security. It's locked in Venezuela, Colombia, some of Latin America where the oil producing countries are, and now Guyana. Guyana has more than 11 billion barrels of oil. It's a drop in the bucket, but it's a good, sensitive drop, a kind of a strategic reserve for America, kind of strategic reserve in a bigger context. And I think we have multiples of that 11 billion barrels of oil. Only we don't know it yet. We don't know it. So America has its energy security. An American company, and Exxon and other American companies have a contract sanctity. The American ambassador is walking back, and that should come out tomorrow, is walking back what she said in Starbuck News on April 10th, 2019. We won't interfere. If Guyana feels it has a right, as a sovereign nation, it has a right and a room for renegotiation, then we certainly won't interfere, right? So now, but she's saying, we laud you for sanctity of contract, and so much could happen for Guyana. In the meantime, we go back to elimination of racial discrimination. We go back to your program last night. We go back to Brother Takuma and his fireworks, or what has been interpreted as fireworks, and we say there are these insecure people in this country, primarily African Guyanese, Amerindian Guyanese to a lesser extent, and some Indo-Guyanese. Or as you said, there may be more poor people, poor Indians in Guyana, given, somebody said it here, given the numerical relationships. Now, everybody's gotten what they want. America's got its energy security locked in Guyana. Exxon has got sanctity of contract, and Hess Corporation, and Schlumberger, and Baker Hughes, and all the others got rushing here, already here, and coming here. What have we got? What have we got? We talk about the 2016 contract under the coalition as being lopsided and one-sided and wrong-sided. Good. Where are we today? 7 years later. Where are we today, 2.5 years after elections? Where are we today in terms of saying that the security, the economic security of the Guyanese people is at a better level, is on a deeper foundation, a solid foundation. We're not where the World Bank can do its survey and says, well, it's not 48% of our people living on $5.50 a day. It's now 28%, and even that is too high, or 18%, or no, or 8%, which might be somewhat acceptable. Where is our economic security based on everybody else getting a huge, sweet, succulent piece of the Guyana oil pie? There is that imbalance, there is that skew, there is that abomination, there is that insult. And our government has it, the PPP has it in its hands to say, well, listen, we've got to get something to give to our people, all of our people. But instead, now it's talking about how we're a good friend to America, and we're gonna we're honorable people. Well, I want to laugh at that one. We are honorable people and an honorable government, and we'll do this and that. And no, 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 no. Let Guyanese need, all Guyanese need, not the ones at the top, not the cabals, not the cronies, not the family members and the friends. We want energy security. We want economic security. I want it. I'm sure you gentlemen want it, and we'll take as much of it we can get. And collectively, when we sit here and speak here, and all the other guests before and after, we, being Guyana, Oil Dorado Guyana, we need to get more. We need to have that security, and it goes hand in hand with energy security and contract sanctity.
Henry Jeffrey, geopolitics never
Yes.
goes away.
Well, America has what it wants in the Caribbean. I mean, they are back in good grace with Venezuela for the most part. Venezuela has the most oil in the world, and if Exxon didn't fall out with Venezuela, you might not find any oil in Guyana, because nobody was going to mess around with giving up what they had to give up there to come to Guyana. So it's as a result of Chavez and his boys doing what they want that you end up finding oil in Guyana. Therefore, everybody know what the results are. We always suspected it. People, you always come and they find somewhere, then they cap it, it's not sufficient. And they gone, and it's happening all in the interlight, all to Cuba. So effectively, the Americans have, for the most part, what they want. But Ghana government has enough money to give a universal basic income. Ghana signed to the UN treaty to say you must create a floor that your people nobody in the country must go and sleep without. And part of that can be a universal basic income. They signed. This is what they agreed to. But they're not doing it, and they have enough money to do it. They're spending billions on ID card. They can spend, and then they can run and tell public servants, oh, if we spend on you, it's inflationary. There are certain things you laugh at. You have to laugh. If you are running a business, you would not, first of all, have to take in the cost of your labor and see that you are recompensing your labor in a sensible way. No, they do everything else. And then they give away money, helter skelter. And then when it comes to public servants to pay them something, this are going to cause inflation. And this is the workers. It's foolishness. The PPP knows it can't give you. PPP wants nothing that is not in control of and can determine who get what. Gold scholarships. You got all ministry education, university, and all that. You're going to arrange through parliament and all these other things to have a proper scholarship program. But you see, that wouldn't have been in the hands of the PPP to say, I am giving this person scholarship. Oh, look at our scholarship. More blacks getting scholarships. That's what you're hearing. They want everything to be in their hands. If they come out and say, everybody gonna have, that means every black gonna get to. You want to impoverish them so they'll run to you. That's the game in town. Impoverish these people so they'll run to you. They're scared to lose a little work, then get heart attack and all this sort of thing if you only talk. That is the game. So when they got enough money, it's no longer about money to do these things that to help ordinary people in this country. They have it. They're not going to do it. And they can find ways to help their own people. They can go wrong with us. You know, they do a miserable job at Monaco in terms of allowing people to come down the road and then cause chaos. And the next day they go on there and give the people money. And there are a lot of who should be. I mean, I would have thought you would hear about discipline of the force, something, because you know some people coming down. The minute you hear you have some sort of protest like that, you know this likely to happen. You're supposed to have proper contingency plans there to deal with that. Where was the police? Somewhere up the road, somewhere else. And then the next day you run there and you say, oh, I'm giving away money, giving this to this person and that person. So the PPP do not want to give anything that they don't have control of. So they can give you scholarship, they got control of what we get scholarship. They are giving it. We have given it. The PPP government, no, the PPP not government, not any national government. We are in control. That is the game. And therefore, they are not doing it because they want to dominate you. They want to suppress you. And they want to force you in one way or another to say, man, I can't take this no more. It's better go and vote for the PPP or something. And you'll vote for the PPP. I think that the liars should look around. Because I think this attempt to browbeat your elective representative of an ethnic group is illegal internationally. Illegal. The government is supposed not to be browbeating them, but to make rules and regulations and give administrative help so that they can carry out their duties in a more economic and properly administrative manner. But that's not what happened. They want one. Guyana means assimilation. They want to assimilate. They are claiming they want to assimilate all of us. All of us must be one guy. And is this thing gone away for over a decade now? More than a decade, 2-3 decades. Everybody knows stupidness. So, but they want that. But they know to themselves that they can go under the bottommost and preach the racism. Oh, yeah.
Yes. Henry Jeffrey there, laying it out as usual. Tonight we have had the Spin Twins on, as they've been dubbed, Dr. Henry Jeffrey, GHK Lall. We want to thank you all for coming on as usual and giving your perspectives on what's happening in Guyana. Quite an interesting time. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And in the meantime, I'll keep reading both of you, and I encourage our viewers. Dr. Jeffrey can be found on Village Voice, and GHK Lall is all over, all over. Brothers, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
And to you, the audience, thank you as usual for staying with us. Hello to you there in Atlanta, Georgia. All of you in Guyana. Good evening to you in Linden. And all of you in Guyana continue to join us tomorrow night. I'm going to have Rickford Burke. Rickford Burke, one of our favorite guests. He will be on tomorrow. Rickford Burke, and the next day I'm working to get the young lady who was charged for terrorism, Robin Simon, on Thursday. That's the lineup for the next 2 days. Rickford Burke tomorrow, Robin Simon on Thursday. Thank you all. Good night. And of course, as we say, We love our brothers in uniform, and we love our sisters in uniform. They are our brothers, they are our sisters. We are fighting for them. We are fighting for them to get better wages. We are fighting to them to get better working condition. We're fighting for them to remain professional. And the first step in the direction of professionalism is not to turn your guns on your brothers and sisters, not to turn your guns on any Guyanese, ordinary Guyanese fighting for justice.